Welcome to Where Parents Talk. My name is Lianne Castelino. Our guest today is a professor of psychology at Florida Atlantic University. Dr. David Bjorklund is also an author and a researcher. His research focus includes cognitive development in children and evolutionary developmental psychology. Dr. Bjorklund joins us today from Boca Raton, Florida. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Lianne, for having me. It's a pleasure.
Dr. Bjorklund, you are the co-author of a recent study that appeared in the Journal of Pediatrics, focusing on the relationship between independent play or independent activities and children's mental health. As a starting point, could you take us through the impetus for this study?
Very good question. Well, there are three authors in the study. The lead author is Peter Gray. And Peter is a retired experimental psychologist from Boston, and he's become very interested in educational issues and the role of play. David Lancy is another author. He is a anthropologist who studied children from an anthropological perspective, and I'm a developmental psychologist who's been interested in the topic of play. And as you said, evolutionary psychology, how our evolutionary past influences our behavior today, and how understanding something about our evolutionary past can help us better understand and maybe do something beneficial with development. And the three of us, the interests of the three of us have overlapped. So we have worked on other projects before, and one common interest we all have is the importance of play in development, which is often overlooked. And part of play, and this was sort of Peter Gray's main impetus here, is the independence it has. Play is something that children do on their own. They choose to play. And this is very important, not just for the sake of play itself, but this gives them autonomy. And so the focus of this article was really autonomy, doing things on their own, at their own initiative, sometimes a little risky, and the effect it has on mental health, play being a very central part of it. But our three interests sort of overlapped on this, and we got the three of us together to write this article, focusing on the role of autonomy, of independence, and the common ground is play, the importance of play, but it extends beyond that. Play is only one example, but a very important example of children experiencing and exercising autonomy and independence in their actions, and the consequences it has, the often surprisingly important consequences it has.
I'm struck by something you said there with respect to the fact that play is often overlooked. Why do you believe that is?
It's what kids do, and they're kids. The real important stuff happens in adulthood. This is where, the real stage of humanity exists in adults. We're the ones who do the building, who do the mating, who raise children. Adulthood is very important, and of course it is. But we often see the process of development in children is just, they've got to go through it until they get to adulthood. And it turns out that's not a very good way of looking at it. What happens during childhood is important in and of its own self, both for children while they're doing it, but also for the adults they're going to become. And as a result, we see in modern culture anyway, play being seen as frivolous. If you take a look at what has been happening in American schools, and this has been happening in European schools, Asian schools, all over the world as well, over the past 40, 50, 60 years, play has been de-emphasized. Recess has been de-emphasized. And even when you want to give kids some recess, let's give them something that they can learn to do. We'll give them some organized physical education activity. We'll give them some math games. Why let them waste it on play? And it's understandable. Schools have to have a lot of responsibility for kids. We need to educate children in modern technological culture, and in doing so, we've underemphasized play as something frivolous, something that if we can find something better for them to do, we should do it. And it turns out that's just the wrong approach. Not that teaching the 3 R's isn't important, of course it is, but so is the role of play, so is the role of free play in children's development, both in a school context, but especially outside the school context.
What can you take us through, Dr. Bjorklund, some of the key findings of your research?
Well, it started with a look at patterns of changes in independent activity over the past 50 or 60 years, mainly in the US, but also in other parts of the world, certainly Europe and parts of Asia. And when I grew up, when I was a child in the 50s and 60s, I had loving parents. You know, they wanted the best for me, as all parents do. But I had an awful lot of freedom. I'm looking back on it. Once I became old enough to go out in the neighborhood on my own, which was probably 6 or 7 years of age, there were other kids in the neighborhood. We played our own games. I discovered baseball at age 8, and we'd go down across the street, across the brook. We'd mow the field so we could play baseball with our own rules. I rode my bike about a mile to school occasionally when I was probably 8, 9, or 10 years of age. I'd come home from school, change clothes, have a snack out in the neighborhood, came home at supper. Once a little homework was done, maybe go out again in the summertime. You're back home when the street lights come on. I didn't realize it, but this was the golden age of play for children. A lot of autonomy, a lot of independent activity. Parents cared. Parents, I got in trouble if I didn't come home when the street lights went on. There were certainly rules. And what we're seeing now is a decrease in this independence. And it's understandable, but this goes back to probably started in the 60s. It really accelerated in the 80s. And there's a concern about the safety of our children. It's a nasty world out there, we believe. You look at the news, and of course it is. If a child gets kidnapped in Portland, Oregon, we know about it in Portland, Maine, the same day. And we think it's a lot closer than it is. Truth is, the world is no more dangerous for children today than it was back 50 years ago. We just perceive it so. Some places, traffic is a danger. Some neighborhoods are dangerous. There's no doubt. There's some danger out there. But parents have become very concerned about the safety of their children. And of course, we should be as parents. But this extreme emphasis on safety, minimizing the risks that they take, minimizing the chances they get to get hurt, get disappointed, causes children to lose opportunities to act independently, to have control over important aspects of their life, to choose events. And we see this across, again, the globe, and we see this change occurring over 50 years. It's sort of accelerated, I think, in the last couple of decades. But this is correlated with changes in mental health, decreases in mental health. From the 60s and 70s, there are surveys that go back this far. They're asking kids pretty much the same sorts of questions over a 50-year period. And we're seeing just substantial increases in psychopathology, mainly anxiety, depression, suicide attempts, suicide ideation. It is really scary. The American Pediatric Association, the World Health Organization has identified this. This is not just a few crazy ivory tower a psychologist coming up with these things, but this is an epidemic, and these two are correlated. And we know from a lot of psychological research and anthropological research that these things are correlated, and there is some cause and effect in there. At least we certainly suspect there is. Good psychological theory, some good psychological data to suggest when children have a little more autonomy, a little more, feel more in control of their world, they're able to handle the slings and arrows of abuse that life throws us better. Yes, there's things to be depressed about, things to be sad about. Well, we get over it. There's things to be anxious about, but we can handle it. And children need, adolescents particularly need this sense of autonomy to develop who they are and to function well. It is, we're not saying this is the cause for the increased depression and anxiety, but it's seemingly one important cause. And again, we think a very important cause.
As you and your fellow researchers and co-authors looked at all of this data over 50 years, as you describe it, what struck you most in terms of that data in the findings?
Oh, gee. Well, I think before I took a really closer look at it, I don't think I realized the magnitude. These things creep up on you. The increase in psychopathology. I'm not a psychopathologist. I'm not a clinical psychologist, so I don't deal with these issues every day. And of course, you realize that children are reporting more anxiety, more depression. That it's in the news, it's in the professional papers I read, but you don't think too much of it. When you take a look at the large scale of it, the careful studies that have been done, the magnitude of it just really sort of surprised me. This is not a small effect. This is a very large effect. And on top of it, we've lately, last 10, 15 years, we've been emphasizing this as it's all due to social media. We want to blame social media on it. And I think social media, has some blame. But social media addiction, if you will, is 10 years old, 15 years old, maybe. This effect goes back to the 70s and 80s. The trend is longer than that. It's not just kids spending too much time on Instagram. That may be part of it, but it's a longer term phenomenon.
So, along those lines, then, what in the current messaging to parents do you believe needs to fundamentally change in order to actively address play, independent activity, and its impact on mental health?
Well, that's a very good question, and I wish I had the simple answer for you. But parents need to think of their children not as helpless creatures that need protection, and of course they need some protection, but as competent individuals and being given chance to show their competence. If you take a look at how parents behaved or viewed their kids, advice that from Ladies' Home Journal and whatnot, the parenting magazines of the past, children were viewed, in 50s, 60s, 70s as very competent. You want to promote independence. We slowly began to view our children as needing protection. And yes, kids need protection. We don't throw your kids out there and defend the world by themselves, but don't view them as helpless. Give them some opportunities, give them some choice. Kids, in some sense, have a lot of choice. Sometimes kids in modern culture, they eat what they want to eat and dress the way they want to dress. That's okay, but they still are restricted in where they can go, how much choice they have in what they do. And if parents can loosen up a little bit. Now, at the extreme, of course, we have helicopter parents, but most of us are not helicopter parents. All of us worry about our kids. I certainly did when I was a parent of younger children. I worry about my grandchildren. That's what parents and grandparents do. But if we can give them more opportunities to make their own choices, to make some of their own mistakes, to let them take a little bit of risks. One of the roles of parenting is to let your children take risks, promote development. Your job is to make get the implements the degree of risk at the right level. You don't want to push it too much, but we've been overly restrictive. Try to and how can you do this? In some communities in the past decade, parents have been arrested for leaving their children out to walk home from school alone, and no one's at home, and they're just shooting baskets out in the driveway by themselves. And a neighbor calls and says, "We've got a neglectful parent here. No one's home to take care of the kid." That's just extreme. We as a culture have to view children as a little more competent. And can we construct environments for this to happen? Can we be the house in the neighborhood where someone is going to be around in the afternoon, but kids are going to be outside uh, playing themselves. And yes, we're there to take care of anything that goes wrong, to keep an eye on things, but let them figure out whose turn it is to bat or to pitch the ball or to get a turn going down the slide before you jump in. Kids can solve their own problems pretty well. Let younger kids and older kids intermix. You'd think this may be a prime for bullying. What it usually results in is older kids taking responsibility for younger kids, serving as the role as teacher, younger kids getting to interact with older kids and feeling what it's like to be a little more competent and feeling a little more in control. These seem easy, but they're really hard things to do. Particularly if you've got a neighborhood that isn't all that safe, particularly if you can't trust the neighbors to be compatible with you, if the walk to school or the bike ride to school, is dangerous. It's not easily done. Maybe work with your schools, have more recess, have opportunities for free play before school and after school, promote these types of things. Schools can play a very important role. It's not just at home, it's not just at school. These are things that we can try to do.
Many parents and caregivers who listen to or watch this interview may say, you know what, everything you've said seems reasonable, it makes sense. But how do I determine what is age appropriate for my child? That is a pain point in many families and households, depending on the dynamic, et cetera, in that home. What would be your response to that?
Well, take a class in child development, but that's not a very sophisticated response there. Take a look what other kids of this age are doing. If you have friends with children, seeing what they're capable of. Assume your child has maybe a little more competence than you think they have, and maybe give them some opportunities where you're watching very closely. Give them a chance to make mistakes that aren't going to be too serious, and you can say, okay, we're pushing this a little bit too much. You really can't make your own tuna fish sandwich effectively. This isn't working out. Let's take a step backwards. Give them some opportunities to do chores around the house, to do things that are important for the household. Children, this is some of David Lancy's work, one of the co-authors here. Children around the world, in the late preschool, early school years, 4 to 6 years old, he calls it the helper stage. Kids want to help. Let them. I think even younger, three-year-old. I've been in the kitchen many times, making something, and you've got a toddler there who wants to help. We all know that it's more work if you let the toddler help than if you don't. And I think we tend to say, no, go do something else. I'll get this done. Give them opportunities early on. This will help them develop their skills. It'll give you an idea of where their abilities are, so you can suggest something else for them to do. To understand what a child's competencies are, is what the developmental level is, you need to work with your kid. You need to give them opportunities, assess them, and then try the next step up.
What do you hope will happen with the results and the findings of this study as we move forward, both in the short term and in the long term?
Well, in the short term, I hope shows like this will get the message out to a lot of parents. We wrote this in the Journal of Pediatrics, so we hope that some pediatricians get the message and are able to advocate to their parents and of children, give them some opportunities to encourage them to have a little more autonomy. We hope this gets, in the big picture, it's a little grandiose, to change society's views. We do see changes in societal views. This one article is not going to do it. But in writing this paper, we noticed other scholarly and not so scholarly people are writing on this topic as well. we're not alone in this. This may be a minority position right now, but there are other people who are promoting these ideas as well. Many of them working in schools to encourage principals and teachers to give children more opportunities for free play, for example, to make some of the decisions themselves, a little more autonomy. There are a lot of things parents can do. Parents are always looking for after-school opportunities for their kids, or often. Do these opportunities afford some independence? I was never a big joiner as a kid, but something that I think was important. I was in Boy Scouts for a little bit. It's now just called Scouts. Boys and girls can join it. And something like Scouts, yes, it's guided, but this mastery is part of it. You get your merit badges, you master it. And it's not someone just teaching you things. You've got to sort of work on them yourselves. The older Scouts work with the younger Scouts, something like that. I'm not an advocate for Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts per se, but some kind of activities where it's not just an adult telling a child exactly what to do, but giving children opportunities to do things themselves, maybe with other children, coordinating with one another to get a job done. How do you put up a tent? It's not an easy thing to do, but if you've got an older child with little experience and younger kids learning from it and working on it, these are ways of building mastery, building competence. Competence is another step with it. Autonomy is one thing, but you want to feel confident, and you want to also have these interactions with other people, with building good relationships. They all go together. Autonomy is a certainly important part of it. These things happen in play. You play with other children, people your own age, younger, a little bit older, and you develop competence in certain skills, some of which are going to be directly related to what you use as an adult, and others are just related to what's important in childhood right now. But it gives you confidence.
We are certainly both in North America, around the world, across the globe, at a very critical point when we talk about youth mental health issues. A global epidemic in and of itself, anxiety and depression are at all-time highs in the United States and certainly in many other countries. So what will happen in your estimation, Dr. Bjorklund, if we don't actively address this in the short term, given all of these statistics, some of which you alluded to? What can we plausibly expect to happen if it's not addressed?
Well, I hate to be overly negative about this, but anxious, maladjusted adolescents and children grow up to be maladjusted adults. And having good mental health, including loneliness, is a big factor in a lot of societies, and this can contribute to depression and whatnot. Loneliness, there's a lot of reasons for it, but some of it is just not developing good social skills, not knowing how to make friends, not being able to keep an intimate partner because you just haven't developed these skills. I'm not saying that more free play when you're 5 and 6 years of age is going to be a cure-all, but if we don't address the mental health crisis we're seeing now in children and adolescents, we're going to continue facing it in the future, and we're going to be dealing with more and more adults who are having difficulty coping with a more and more complex world. And the world is getting more and more complex. You nor I know exactly what the future is going to be for us in another 30, 40, 50 years. Part of it is the world is changing drastically right now. Climate change, of course, and how we're going to adjust to it. But the new technologies, AI, everyone is buzzing about this now since ChatGPT came around. These issues have been around for some years. We don't know what the job market's going to be. We expect that children today are going to grow up to be adults who are going to have various jobs, not going to just have one occupation, but they're going to change them from time to time because technology changes. We need to educate children so they can be flexible. We need to educate them so they can be critical thinkers. Part of this, we think anyway, is developing greater autonomy, greater confidence in oneself, greater mental health now. Uh, I try to be optimistic about the future, but we are in a period of radical change, not just for our society, but for our species. Some people, whether they're right or wrong, are comparing the changes that may be happening in most cultures in the next several decades to the changes that occurred with the Industrial Revolution back a couple hundred years ago. And if you want to go back to the Agricultural Revolution 10 or 12,000 years ago, but it's happening much faster now. And we need well-adjusted, critical thinking adults to handle this. And to do this, we need to raise children who are well-adjusted themselves and have a sense of control and autonomy, and good self-worth.
Dr. David Bjorklund, Professor of Psychology at Florida Atlantic University, we thank you for your time and your perspective today.
Lianne, thank you very much. It's been my pleasure.